All right. Welcome, gentlemen. I have the honor of having two guests today. We have Talbot G, the CEO of HARDI, which is Heating, Air Conditioning, Refrigeration Distributors International. And we also have Ayers, Director of Government Affairs for HARDI. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks so much, Rob.
Good to see ya. And,
it'll be fun.
Yeah. So, Talbot, it looks like you're back in the office. Is that correct? Yeah.
I am. Yeah. I'm one of those stubborn ones. I've been in here the most, but we are slowly phasing our team back in, and by the end of June, we'll be 100% in, raring to go, ready to go.
I am so happy to hear that, and congratulations. Yeah. That's great. That's really, really good news. So let's just let our listeners know, if you don't mind, Talbot, who HARDI is and who your members are real quick.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we're the Wholesale Distributor Association in the industry, HVAC and refrigeration. We are predominantly North America, where we love to boast that we have a member in every congressional district in the U.S., which is fantastic. But we also have members internationally beyond Canada. We have a very strong and growing, thriving Mexico division that is starting to include more and more of Latin America as well. And then we have a spattering of members who are across the pond in the other continents too. A lot of times they'll join because this is the best way to get access to not only other distributors, but also the U.S. leadership of the manufacturers. So associate members are the manufacturer members, pretty much every brand you can think of there that uses wholesale distribution. And then, of course, we have a strong group of manufacturer representative member companies, and really an important piece of the supply chain. So we're glad and happy to help you guys out with this. Congrats on doing this cool forum.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, we were latecomers to the HARDI game. Our agency, KGG Consulting, joined fall of 2019. I'll tell you, it couldn't have come at a better time. My first ever meeting was actually in New Orleans in December 2019, and it was a real eye-opener. I had always heard about meetings because I had been a rep myself for a long time, but just never attended the meetings, and always hearing the guys come back and how charged up they were. And I definitely can say the connections that were made and the speakers you had, you guys do a wonderful, excellent job on those annual meetings with all the collateral you guys have. So let's talk a little bit about that. So your membership, there again, heating, air conditioning, refrigeration, OEMs, manufacturers, distributors, and reps primarily. So around that trade, the information you gather is self-reporting, correct? Your distributor partners give you information about where they stand economically. Talk a little bit about how you get a pulse for the business.
Sure. So we do what's called a monthly sales trends report. And so that is collection from about 250 distributors every single month, giving us 5 key KPIs for that month and the running 12. And so that's how we're able to really assess distributor performance in terms of top line sales, inventory values, sales per employee, day sales outstanding, how quickly customers are paying. Gives us a fantastic snapshot, and we're able to slice and dice that by region, geography, size of company, and even at a higher level, a little bit into segments too, commercial, residential, refrigeration, that sort of thing. So that's what we do every month. We also collect and report out, I should say. We collect every month and then report out monthly unitary sales as well. So those are actual units that distributors are selling to installing contractors. HVAC, we do dabble into some refrigeration, some parts and supplies as well, too, that we capture in that. In fact, we're in the midst of growing that program because we want to be able to better quantify repair versus replace dynamics in the industry, especially with some of the big disruptors we have coming down the pike that Alex will certainly talk about. We want to be ahead of the curve, be able to really see when the industry dynamics start to change, customer behaviors start to change because of regulatory impacts or whatever the case may be. But, all this data collection really became most valuable this last year because of all these inventory supply chain issues. We were able to really quantify, what is the shortage or lack of product that's necessary in the market. And now in this degree, how much above average inventories our distributors are carrying. So then we get some sense, depending on how demand reacts, is there any kind of a bubble, or are we still going to be playing catch up for 12 months or so, right?
Yeah. And you know what? I am extremely impressed and truly appreciate, after what we went through last year, which we'll come back to in a minute, how you actually communicate that to the field and the members. I mean, you must have like 5 monthly newsletters, right? I mean, I'm just trying, I think I lost count, right? I mean, you got the data-driven newsletter, the market intelligence, thermostatus, and then Alex has his government affair. I mean, you can't ask for better being a member and getting that communication. And I really did appreciate that. Like I said, I think we joined in time before last year,
Mhm.
because if you take a look at where we were a year ago, right, in the state of uncertainty and in the midst of everybody just the doors closed, I really found comfort in those newsletters. Were you getting that kind of feedback?
Yeah, I tell you what, that was, I mean, not just for us, but for everybody, the hardest 6 weeks us and our team has ever had. But it's because we felt such immense pressure to try to sift through the clutter and really boil down to what was important for our members, because there was so much uncertainty and there was so much noise out there and there was so much information, but you didn't have time to really curate it. So we felt it was our responsibility to try to curate that for the members. And frankly, we threw the challenge out to the team. We said, if an organization like Hardy can't show its value during this type of a crisis, then it probably shouldn't exist. So we really threw the gauntlet down. Alex was an absolute Superman with all the stuff with PPP and everything. I mean, it got to the point where organizations well outside our industry was leaning on Alex and his knowledge, because he learned it so quickly, so thoroughly, and had so many ins within SBA and other agencies that really helped us get insights that you couldn't find on the cover of the Wall Street Journal or something like that, right? So yeah, we probably quadrupled our content output during that time, but we tried to do it responsibly, efficiently, and packaged in a way that it only took you a minute to read and understand what the action item was, or what the important bit was on it, because the members were scared, nervous, and running full speed. So kudos to the members, by the way, in the whole industry. I mean, good grief. First off, the innovation, the adaptability, and then turning on a dime from being literally cement sneakers to rocket ship tied to your back, right? Like, amazing job by the industry, even though we're still working through some of this stuff. I hope we never lose that context of exactly how dynamic our industry and our channel was during that unprecedented kind of disruption here.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I was going to ask you, how did last year, 2020, change Hardy?
Mhm.
Obviously, you just touched on a big part of it. You quadrupled the amount of content information. What else do you see changing, or what has changed, and where does Hardy go from here?
We got maybe almost a little lucky. We had actually just started implementing a new strategic plan, which was intended to shift us to more of a content delivery, content creation, content delivery type organization. And COVID just put it on steroids. And just basically, we accomplished what was supposed to have been a 5-year plan in 6 months, basically,
Wow.
And but the coolest part about it is it really justified the plan. So the plan itself was a really sound one and has worked out really well for us. So what does that mean? We've invested a lot more in our infrastructure in terms of content delivery. We launched a brand new website that is individually curated based on what members want to subscribe to and what they want to hear about. We added staff, both in terms of our market intelligence and market research side of it, as well as a lot of online learning, communications, all that sort of stuff. So it really did. It just accelerated our plan, validated our plan, but it showed us that we need to be the ones that our members can really trust to give them the most important information when they need it right away, so then they can go make actionable decisions and then hopefully win in the market. That's the plan.
Yeah. Well, kudos to you guys, because you deserve it too. So Talbot, just take a step back and say why you're giving a shout out and kudos to your distributor partners and members. What did they do that really stood out at you last year? What did you see that you say that?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, we always have known this inherently, but it was really proven during the start of the crisis how much distributors sincerely care about their employees and their customers. That was their number one concern, even when they were freaked out about whether they were going to sell another piece of equipment or if they were going to be able to keep a branch open or everything. They were most concerned about keeping everyone safe and healthy. No one disregarded this. They all took it seriously. They talked and they communicated with their employees well and came up with their each individual solutions to how they were going to navigate through all this. So that's the number one thing. I thought that was tremendous and brilliant. The second thing was they were innovative. They found cool ways to try to figure out how to service the customers. And by the way, they took very seriously their recognition as an essential business. It was very important to them that they kept doing their jobs regardless of what the outside circumstances looked like, that they got what people needed to keep food fresh, hospitals running, people warm, cold, whatever the situation may be. They took it very, very seriously. So we saw companies, maybe they didn't have the best technology infrastructure, but they figured out a way to fulfill orders through text, right? Like, how cool is that, right? Or they found a way to shift people to more of an inside role so they could field requests in any format a customer wanted to send it to them. Email, text, fax, whatever, you name it, whatever, and just get the job done. You had salespeople who were carrying product in the beds of trucks for people. You had executives and CEOs, doing all of that, or being the one person on the counter because they didn't want to risk their employees being on the counter, but they knew the customers needed it or wanted to help, right? So just the best people. We always tell new employees, the coolest part of our job is how cool our members are. And this just proved it in spades. What a great group of people they really are.
So what I noticed was there was an efficiency that had to be created, right? Because the doors were not open, but the distributors are getting orders because of being essential, their guys being essential. And they found a way to, whether through storage lockers, will call, leaving stuff outside behind the condensing unit, you come grab it, my end too, I know I'm really, really impressed. And think about, again, a year ago where we were economically, right? We were, as a trade, down double digits, huge double digits. And we rebounded through the rest of the year. And talk about how impressive that is with doors being closed. Where did we end up at the end of 2020? We were positive.
100%.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
There was that efficiency. And it was incredible to watch, honestly. And I admire it, like I think the way you do too. So Alec, talk a little bit about your role. You probably got busier, didn't you? a little bit.
Yeah, for a little while. There was a lot going on last year.
Yeah. Let everybody know what it is you typically work on and working on. There's different areas within government affairs. Explain to everybody what it is specifically, the areas in which you cover and report on and seek information.
Yeah, so government affairs really goes the entire scope of what happens in Washington, D.C. It's everything from what's the administration doing, specifically the White House and all of their staff. Then you have the regulatory agencies. Primarily, we deal with EPA and Department of Energy, but we also have Department of Labor and Department of Transportation that we deal with. So following all of that, while at the same time talking to Congress, trying to get Congress to do what we want them to do or stop them from doing what they want to do that maybe hurts our industry. All of that happens basically on a daily basis. So, our advocacy efforts really are everything from the regulatory agencies all the way to individual members of Congress. I think probably in the last week, we have sent letters to specific members of Congresses from specific distributors, while also doing general comments on behalf of the entire membership to EPA. So it's a constant messaging battle almost. Not only are we messaging to government and trying to influence them to do something on our behalf, but then also telling our membership what are we doing on their behalf for them, and making sure that they understand what's coming, just because of how much influence, especially in our industry, between DOE and EPA, that they can very much change, almost overnight by proposing a rule, what the future of the industry is going to look like.
And you also cover, government funding that relates directly to our trade, along with the EPA. It goes the refrigerant side of the business too, right?
Exactly.
There are phase outs, proposed tax changes and tax laws that Congress faces, right? I mean, you cover quite a bit.
Oh yeah.
And even code development, right?
Mm-hmm.
Forthcoming code. How do you keep
really
up with it?
The codes has been new for us. Code development really has not been a issue for Hardy because we're box in, box out generally as a business. We don't manufacture it, we don't install it. Where generally the codes impact that. So this year, because of the changes that are coming, we got more involved in the code process. We actually now have a code consultant. His entire job is attending code meetings and knowing what the code changes are. And so we've now, working with him, worked on everything from our future storage issues for A2O refrigerants to just now finding out that certain states have these electrical requirements for ground fault interrupter circuits that are having a massive problem with HVAC systems because their variable power trips the circuit, and suddenly the homeowners without air conditioning, and they don't know why. So dealing with trying to make sure that those changes don't impact our industry and getting those fixes as fast as possible. So codes has been, fascinating, also just so much more work because it's so much different than government affairs. Government affairs has a playbook to it.
Yeah.
Codes feel like the Wild West.
There's no script.
At least to me. Yeah, there's no script. You just, they start working and then you're like, what happened? Okay.
So
this
curiosity.
is why we have a code consultant.
Yeah. No, I'm so happy to hear that because on my end, and being an indoor air quality guy, I guess my first thought that comes to mind is, we don't have a fresh air code in this country like Canada does, right? As
No.
a whole, it goes state by state, county by county, however, it's not prevalent in a predominant majority of our country. Do you see anything? Have you heard anything about fresh air at all? Any squabbles, any just insights?
I think everyone wants an indoor air quality standard. And I think a lot of the healthcare spaces have really wanted it for a very long time. Just looking at particulate matter and everything else there. But for the way our code process works, we need a standard for the codes to adopt. And that's where within an industry, if we can come together and develop a single standard for all the manufacturers to use as to what indoor air quality really means, how we test the equipment to meet that standard, then we'll start seeing that adopted into codes. But that's probably a 5-year process. It's just the codes at minimum are a 3-year process once you have a standard. So, it's that amount of time to come up with that standard, and then we'll have something. But I think that's something that's desperately needed just because of how we've learned over the last year. Indoor air quality really has an impact on overall health. So we need to make sure that we understand what that means and how we meet a standard.
It makes me very happy to hear you say that, because it's a constant discussion on our end with our manufacturers. And, it's terrible because you could even have a code written, but then it's not really, there's ways, to get fresh air in the house without actually being efficient. It's just the craziest thing, So I'm happy to hear you say that. I'm glad to explore more about the person you brought on staff. Have you not actually announced that yet, you guys, as far as the person?
Yes.
Okay.
His name's Jim Kenzel. So
Awesome.
he also works with the American Supply Association, which is basically a partner distributor group for plumbing side. So a lot of our members are actually members of both us and ASA. So I think Jim's written several blog posts now on the code process that I hope folks are having a chance to read and kind of learn how we are having impact in a place that we've never had an impact before.
Excellent.
Yeah. And Rob, with this IAQ topic, we actually went to the manufacturers and to ASHRAE and really pushed them hard. So they put a working group together to try to expedite some of this on the IAQ front. As you well know, there's a lot of products that kind of came out of the woodwork for IAQ over the last year, and distributors had no way of truly evaluating them, right? So, and then of course there was a healthy skepticism that came into the marketplace. Sure. So for you guys and your agency, I would say whatever you and your teams can be doing to really know the technicals of these products and being able to articulate the effectiveness of the product compared to whatever else might be out there. That's really what the distributors need the most right now.
I'm happy to hear you say that. And a lot changed with us as being manufacturers reps last year. I mean, we did record training with distributors last year. I mean, I was constantly, this time last year, I think I lost my voice. I can't even tell you how many times, just from all the virtual training that we do. Thank God we were able to do it virtually.
Right.
All those early mornings and late nights getting in front of contractors. And you're right. It's a healthy skepticism. And I like the way you say that, because the technologies have to be vetted, third-party tested. Nobody in this industry wants to be the snake oil guy, although they're there. There's multiple ways to handle indoor air quality. We preach this all the time with our distributors. There's no one silver bullet. You have to approach it by the occupants and the building itself, because they're all different. And there is no one silver bullet. And I appreciate you saying that, and I appreciate your advocacy on your behalf for this side of the industry as well. I think it's hugely, hugely important. And there's a lot of gray area, right? I mean, there is a ton of gray area. So with that, Alex, back to you real quick. IAQ being at the forefront of everybody's mind last year, it got Congress's attention by way of money delegated through, I think, first initially the CARES Act and then the American Rescue Plan, dedicated to helping schools, I think primary and secondary education. Talk a little bit about what we saw from money delegated to HVAC equipment. What did you see play out?
And actually, it's been over 3 different bills. We had that very first. At that time, it was a lot of money, and now it's considered by far the smallest package that we did, just because it was so early in the pandemic. We had no idea how broad that scale was. And it created what's called the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. And so this was at that time, very small bucket of money, but it went out to schools and said, the entire purpose is to not only improve indoor air quality, but improve sanitation, and then also assist in distance learning. Most schools just didn't have laptops for students, things like that. So we started off there, and in that point, HVAC was not explicitly mentioned, but it was still a possible use of the money. It was this kind of generic improving the indoor air quality, improving sanitation side of it. Then the CARES Act came along and introduced HVAC specifically as one of the 12 stated purposes. It said, you've got $89 billion now across 16,800 school districts. So that's a fairly large chunk of money for each school district. But at the time, they were still kind of in emergency mode. They were going, okay, we need Lysol wipes, we need plexiglass dividers, or we need to get, laptops to students. And so we were having a hard time getting, folks to focus on, you have these HVAC systems that are pumping air through your schools. And the problem is HVAC is very much an invisible part of the school building and the infrastructure. You don't see it. You occasionally maybe feel the breeze from it, but you don't really notice it's there until it breaks. And so in their minds, the HVAC system wasn't broken, even though it wasn't as good as it could have been. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we make sure that schools understand what the role of HVAC is, and partnering with AHRI, the manufacturers, produced the 5 steps for healthier schools.
It's an actual infographic, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Exactly.
You guys created an infographic. Awesome. Yeah.
Yep. So that is on the website. It's something that you can take to schools. ASHRAE as well has an entire set of information on the nuts and bolts of the engineer is going to understand, how do I improve the HVAC system? What upgrades do I need? Well, then as we went throughout the school year, people were still focusing, okay, what's the thing right in front of my face? How do I spend this money most efficiently? Well, then the American Rescue Plan came along and really doubled that amount of money. We're now talking about $190 billion that doesn't have to be spent within 1 year. You have until 2024 to get it spent. So with that amount of time, now I think is when we're going to start seeing more of this money actually get spent on the HVAC upgrades. Not only are we now in summer where there's not students in the building, so they can, contractors can get in there and work on them, but there's literally just so much money being thrown at them. Schools are saying, how do I spend this money? And HVAC is an obvious way to do it. They just have to get to the decision maker and say, here's what you can do. We have the products. Let us know what you want to do, basically.
I just learned something from you. So I'm so happy to hear you say 2024, because originally I think, was it the CARES Act that had to be used in 2021 or by the end of 2021?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was actually kind of weird. So it was like the state had to give the money to the school by the end of 2021, but then there wasn't like really a deadline on the school to do it. But the assumption was you're going to spend this very quickly.
If they didn't spend it, it just went back to the federal government.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. Because if there was any money left in the state coffers, the federal government took it back. Once the state gave it to the school, it was like, spend this quickly, but we don't really have a deadline to you. But if it's in our bank account, we have to send it back to the federal government. Then they said, okay, no, now by 2024, you have to do this. I think that was part of the pandemic emergency. Let's get this out there. Yeah. Coming back to, okay, let's do good policy making. But now that we have this deadline, I think that puts the pressure then on schools to say, okay, we do have this bucket of money that we have to get spent now. What can we spend it on? Because we've bought every Lysol wipe in the entire country at this point.
Right.
So I think the HVAC systems are now coming to the top of that list.
See, I think in terms of a mechanical contractor, right? So how do I put myself in a position to grow my business and help school districts out? Starts with the school system. A contractor can't go and apply for the money, nor can an engineer, right? I mean, it has to be the school district.
The school district has to, and I use apply basically in air quotes, because the way the school gets the money is based on what's called Title I funding. This goes back to a bill that was passed over 40 years ago. And it's how essentially federal funding gets passed out to every school district. There's an equation that they use based on number of students in certain categories. They figure it out. And then, so every school, as soon as the money was passed, knew how much they could get. So then there's this application process, which basically says you're willing to take this money and spend it. Some states ask, what are you spending it on up front? Some states say, tell us what you spent it on by the end of the deadline. We'll be good. That's been the most frustrating thing, is the speed at which some states very quickly got the money out there. Some states took, I want to say forever, but it's finally getting out there. That's, I think, the hardest part, is that it does go through a multi-level kind of bureaucratic process. And sometimes that's very slow. But once the school has that money, they can spend it. And so then it's finding, is it the mechanical contractor? Is it the engineer? Is it the architect? Who has the relationship with the school district? Because at the end of the day, I think this business, along with a lot of other businesses, is all about relationships. And so it's finding who has the relationship to influence the principal or the superintendent to say, okay, we know you have buildings that need HVAC upgrades. We know how to do this. We'll spend the money for you.
Have you guys considered, and maybe you've already done this, and again, I always think in terms of the contractor. That's usually where my mind is, because that's the guy that, he's in the trenches, right? The question is, have you come up with a toolkit, like put something in one spot for this money and how it flows? Or if a distributor was smart, they put all the links to the money and all the websites where all the information is in one spot. Have you guys thought about creating like that, or have you done something similar to that?
Yeah, we did a webinar. I'm trying to remember when we did this webinar. It would have been early this year, where we partnered not only with AHRI, because manufacturers have a very much an interest in this, but also had a couple of contractors come on and tell us how they've done school projects in the past. How did they get the in with the superintendent because they've done these prior to the pandemic, things like that. So I would definitely go back, and that webinar recording is on our website.
I will.
Because we're dealing with not only 50 states, but 16,800 school districts.
Yeah.
Putting all of that together in a single place is very difficult. The one resource that we have found, and I didn't want to just blatantly steal it from them, but it's the National Council of State Legislatures. They put together a resource with all of the individual state departments of education, access to the application links there. Because that's very much in their wheelhouse. I didn't want to, just blatantly basically steal their content. So I've been telling people, if you just basically look up the National Council of State Legislatures,
Excellent.
and SSER, that's that Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, you'll find this content.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Yes, we'll share that. 2 quick questions that I want to come back to Talbot. So we just talked about schools, funding for schools specifically in secondary education. Have you seen any other money set aside for actual federal buildings themselves? Think about all the federal property out there, including museums, and have you seen any money dedicated to that? Anything earmarked? Is there government service, GSA or something?
Yep. GSA has got a bucket of money that they're spending on things on, but also what's been interesting is, so the CARES Act and then also the American Rescue Plan involved money for states. It was essentially these governors' funds, and the governors were told, okay, you now need to come up with plans to spend this money. And some states, Ohio is the one that comes to mind, was the first, said, we are going to put out grants for small businesses to upgrade their business facilities. And so I don't remember exactly how much money Ohio did, but it was several $1 million was put out there for businesses to apply for funds. That allowed folks to upgrade that wouldn't, again, to me, HVAC is very much an invisible part of your infrastructure. Until it's broken, you don't think about it. And so this gave some light to that, hey, there's ways to make these indoor air quality upgrades, and the state is willing to subsidize, part of that upgrade process. So part of that is just seeing what every state did. Not many of them did it, but I know Ohio is one of them.
So that's publicly in public spaces. Have you seen anything in terms of homeowners, becoming aware? Last year, I think homeowner recognition of the air they're breathing now than there ever was before. Have you seen anything amongst any of the states or federally that earmarks any kind of money for home upgrades or incentives even for home upgrades to improve air quality?
When we get to the homeowner, the incentives become tax credits. 25C is how we refer to it in the tax world. We have a lot of weird numbers and letters in the tax world that mean things only to those people that understand it. But 25C is a homeowner tax credit for HVAC upgrades. We've been trying to improve it, actually, because it's a one-time credit in your lifetime of that house. So we want to make that something that can be annually. You can continuously upgrade your systems as technology gets better. A lot of it's based around energy efficiency, but frankly, if you have an older system, the energy efficiency also then comes with better systems like filters and things like that. So there's a double benefit kind of in the world we're living in.
Yeah, it would be super nice if there was a credit for purchasing a mechanical ventilator. Think about that, right? One of the most expensive pieces of fresh air components or IAQ, one of the most important was fresh air. And what a tax credit that would be if we could get like a ERV or an HRV credit. So there's food for thought, Alex, as you're going forward with your development.
We just went through a whole hearing in the Senate Finance Committee on improving every energy efficiency tax credit and basically molding them into one. And we said, okay, if you're going to touch 25C, you have to make these improvements because folks aren't being able to take advantage of this the way they need to. So we'll hopefully see that move sometime later this year as taxes generally are an end of the year process. This is the habit of how DC operates.
Another comment, just feedback, I really appreciated. There was an automated letter you sent out, I think about a month ago, that it was a template letter to our elected officials. It was based around what, a proposed tax law or
So there are a lot of talk in DC right now is about infrastructure, and the definition of infrastructure being used is very broad. It's everything from the roads and bridges you traditionally think of, airports, bridges, the traditional surface transportation, and then also airports, but also broadband and a lot of other kind of what we call soft infrastructure. It's things that if we improve upon them, they help the economy grow. And then the wish list gets even farther into some things that maybe is it just extra spending priorities that are being put forth by Democrats that maybe won't be enacted in final law. And so what we're looking at now is something in the neighborhood of about $1 trillion in spending on infrastructure, everything from really that hard infrastructure that is roads, bridges, airports, through to broadband and some of these other priorities, and trying to make sure that, looking forward, we have the ability to get these upgrades in place. It's about, I believe it's 8 years of spending they're looking at. The top line is about 1.2 trillion, and figuring out a way to get that passed. But the biggest thing in DC is right now, it's almost tribal. It's Democrats versus Republicans. It's the worst stereotype of how DC operates. And so finding that bipartisanship to get that done is the big hurdle right now.
You do fly-ins typically every year, correct?
Yep. Our next fly-in will be May 16th and 17th of 2021. So we have that scheduled. Really excited for everyone to come back to DC because hopefully by that time, Capitol Hill will be reopened again. Right now, it is very hard to get a meeting in person. So most of my advocacy work is happening the same way we're doing this right now. It's through Zoom. That's why I have this microphone basically, is to make sure that we're communicating well with the Hill. But once that Hill reopens, we're absolutely looking forward to getting folks back in DC and building those in-person relationships that I think has helped us so much at the beginning of the pandemic because people knew who we were. Yeah. When they know who you are, they'll listen to you. Yeah.
Well, keep up the good work, my friend. You're doing excellent. And again, I appreciated that template that gave me a template and direct access to my elected officials was perfect. It was perfect because I happen to agree with what the letter was stating because it was to the benefit of our business. So it was perfect. Keep doing what you're doing. So Talbot, we had a virtual HARDI meeting last year. That was one of the changes, right? So we did a virtual. Kudos to you guys. That was an excellent event. I talk about it all the time because I appreciated the Orange Theory guy coming on between sessions and do a little stretching exercise. I talk about that all the time. You did a wonderful job. One of the other really useful pieces of information and reports that you guys did, you guys hired a survey company to go out and survey contractors last fall, correct? It was like over 400, I'm guessing, I think it was over 400 contractors. I use that report all the time with our reps. I really do. What you asked and the information you gathered was tremendous. And I actually made slides out of the key takeaway slides to use with our rep groups, but it highlighted not only what was happening last year, but bigger picture stuff about what they appreciated. And really, we have to respect the contractors and what they're thinking and believe. Those are our ultimate customers outside of the homeowners. Those are our guys that we need to cater to. I noticed a couple of things. I'd like to have you hear what you think. I'll just read it to you real quick so everybody knows what I'm talking about. So one of the questions was, when selecting a distributor to purchase from, please rank what's most important to you. Obviously, product availability, pricing, delivery, service, equipment manufacturer brand, technical support, outside sales presence and communication relationship. Warranty counter. Number 9, training provided. Training was huge. And then location. So those were the top 10. But you went on and you had the company drill down to what is it else that you saw. And what I noticed was, because again, we talked a little bit about this earlier, the efficiency that was created out of last year by not having the buildings distributors open, we were forced to do things a little bit differently. Less foot traffic, right, is a huge deal because there's a lot of sales that are done with ancillary items going in and out. Do you see that changing the way we do business now? Do you still see that continuing on going forward? Like, so less foot traffic. It seemed like the contractors thought that might be the way they went. And how is that going to impact our distributors with having less foot traffic?
Yeah, great question. First off, you're talking about our voice of customer research. That's part of our annual state of the channel report. And by the way, we're actually expanding it yet again. And we're also trying to grow and have more of the commercial contractor voice also incorporated. And next week, we're launching our brand new first ever Voice of Contractor Advisory Council.
Oh, wow.
So we have 20 plus distributors, non-competing, coming in from all over the country to help us take the next step with this research. And what do we need to learn? What do we need to do? So yeah, we're doubling down on this area. This is really important for us. But so listen, one of the things that I think came out of 2020 was the stores that found a way to reopen and welcome customers back in ended up with an advantage over those that chose or were prohibited from reopening fully and welcoming customers back in. So the analysis really right now indicates that the contractors really value that ability to come into the facility, to interact with the counter staff, to interact with people, answer questions face to face. So I think actually, if anything, 2020 reinforced the wholesale distribution model. There are going to be tweaks. There obviously is going to be a little bit more commerce done digitally in some form or another. But there is undeniable retained value of the interpersonal relationships coming into the stores and being able to touch, feel, and see product. It still matters. It's still important.
It does. And you brought up that relationship. Okay. So, distributors have outside salespeople, territory sales managers, right? One of the things that came out of that survey that I harp on the most with our guys is the role of that salesperson is more important now than ever before, because if there is, let's say, less foot traffic, or we're doing things more digitally speaking, that relationship becomes even more key. And if the territory sales guys realize this, they'll take that opportunity and further develop those relationships. So distribution can't go away, right? I mean, and I guess that would be a good question for you. How do you see the internet sales going forward? How does that change our traditional role of distribution in your mind, Talbot?
So one of the biggest misses of 2020 was everyone assumed this was going to be an explosive accelerant towards e-commerce just because of the nature of 2020 and the shutdowns and the lockdowns. And the data just simply didn't support it. The growth of sales through e-commerce grew at the exact same rate as it's grown for the last however many years you want to look back. It's still growing, don't get me wrong, and it's not insignificant, but it's not like it grew by multiples of percentages over historical rates. So I think there's some distributors that are probably breathing a little bit of a sigh of relief that if there was ever going to be a disintermediation event that might take place, it's forcing branches to shut down. And that's not what happened. In fact, it reinforced their value and everything. So are we still going to see distributors continue to invest in e-commerce platforms, digital fulfillment, and digital ordering? Yes, absolutely. Do we feel like if you don't have it done today, you're going to be out of business next year? No, absolutely not. I completely disagree with that. So really interesting to watch and see how this has gone. Our products are unique. They're a little more complicated. Every solution is a little bit unique. It's not a pure commodity. So it needs hands-on. It needs to be talked through a lot. And frankly, we're talking about a replacement rate on a good year, a little above 7%. That means 93% of it is repairing something that's probably been out there for 10 plus years, right? So that's kind of a hard thing to translate into a pure e-commerce type model. And look, I think our industry is the better for it. I think it's going to make us in the long run smarter, faster, leaner, but also more technically adapt, because you still have to know how to answer the technical question when it comes right away, right? So it's not, you can't just turn that off and say, oh, go to the rep website. No, it's our industry just doesn't work that way.
It doesn't. And I'll tell you again, back to the HARDI meeting 2 years ago in 2019, two of your speakers really stood out. I mean, it really made me feel good about being in this trade. I came charged up, if you look at the overall economics of the country and where it is, even from a housing standpoint, we're 4 million houses in the hole right now. I mean, that's a good sign for the trade, all trades really, right? But ours in general. So to manage, residential new construction, the add-on stuff, you need people, you need brick and mortar, you need to move the product somewhere, you need to move it in and out of somewhere. And, I couldn't agree with you more. Honestly, I think there's bright spots for us all, I think. And kudos to you guys for keeping that information and keeping those speakers in front of us. I'm going to come back, kind of final thoughts here. Alex, what would you say we should be looking out for going forward into next year? First of all, let's do detrimental. What are some things we should really watch out for this year that might be detrimental to our business and keep our eyes open for? Is there one thing that stands out at you going forward?
Yeah, I would say the thing that stands out to me the most is, and this is really based on where you live in the country. If you are in the DOE South or Southwest regions for regional efficiency standards, and how long we were looking at inventory from the point of, when you put in the order to receiving it could have a major impact for the South and Southwest and how much inventory you have left at the end of 2022. Because on January 1st, 2023, if you don't have equipment that is certified to meet that new energy efficiency standard, you can't sell it. It has to be installed by the end of the year. So, these lead times on inventory could have a major issue if you're not paying attention and see something show up in your warehouse, towards the end of cooling season. And now you don't have an opportunity to sell it before January. You now have to find a way to get rid of that somewhere else in the country, and that being in the North region. Don't get me wrong. We're trying to actively fix that so it's not going to be an issue. But right now, as the law says, that's going to be an issue that needs to be dealt with.
Gotcha. And despite a heat wave, right? I mean, of course we get a heat wave in those regions right now.
Right. Yeah.
Crazy.
To me, the my biggest worry is suddenly, say, July, August of next year is unseasonably cold. And we just don't get rid of inventory.
Right.
That is the biggest worry for me right now as an industry.
Mother Nature, man. There's no way around her. And then finally, Alex, what's one of the bright spots we can look forward to in the next 18 months or so?
I would say it's all of the research that we're going to have coming out. We've got a new learning management system being put on the website, but part of that will be education, specifically transition to A2L refrigerants. So later this summer, we're going to have a couple of new classes. First one of them was going to be for folks dealing with A2Ls prior to 2024, and then another class dealing with after 2024 and the changes in the fire code. It's going to be a way to make sure that we are ready for this transition that's happening over the next 5 years, really the next 15 years, but really in the next 5 years, we're going to see a lot of change there. And it's a way to make sure that we're ready for it. Because to me, change is only a problem if you're not ready for it. And if by being ready for it, we can take advantage of it and continue the growth that we've seen over the last several years.
Well, thank you for all the work you're doing, Alex, to stay on top of that for us. We really do appreciate that. Talbot, what would you suggest to a distributor looking ahead? What if they're not doing it now, and given what we went through, is there anything that stands out at you that you would say to them, just keep an eye out for this, or you might want to consider looking at this to help yourself and help your business? Is there anything that stands out at you as far as suggestions for them?
Yeah, there's a few things. First off, just from a business strategy standpoint, that voice of customer report also showed exactly how wide the gap is getting between large contractors and medium and small contractors in terms of how they want to do business, what they value from their distributor, what they need, and what they expect. So first off, if you're not doing some form of customer segmentation process now, you need to be. And if you have been doing it for a long time, are you making sure you're updating it with these new inputs of customer expectations that research like ours is putting out, so that it's not based on assumptions from 5 years ago, but it's being updated going forward. So that's the first one, because the one size definitely does not fit all. And you as a business, do you know who your core customer really is? Is it the mid and small guys, or are you really tailoring to those larger contractors? And if so, you need to shape your business differently or accordingly. Secondly, we've been on this bandwagon for a while about talent development, recruitment, retention, all of that. This battle for talent is only going to get harder, not easier. And again, we're a little bit of that unknown industry, right? So most people don't come out of school, be it whatever level, and look for us, right? So you got to have a sales mentality when it comes to your talent. And then once you do that, do you have the whole infrastructure in place that's actually going to make your place of business somebody wants to stay and grow a career in? Or are they going to view you transactionally, get what they can out of you, and then move and jump to another spot? So we really, over the last several years, have really doubled down on helping distributors be just as strategic with their talent and talent management as they are with their sales, their inventory, their supplier relationships. And those who do it are winning. They're benefiting. They're retaining at a better rate. They're recruiting at a higher caliber, right? And they're probably more efficient even in their comps too. So that's the next big thing. The kind of the old days of throwing somebody into the warehouse and then hoping 20 years later they become a senior leader for you. You can't bank on that. You have to have a plan. You have to be disciplined, and you have to be able to measure and compare performance quickly, because it takes so much longer to refill positions or to restaff if you need to.
Excellent. So what do you see your bright spot going forward the rest of this year and into next year? What do you see? How do you see the trade ended up?
Well, look, if you were a manufacturer questioning 2 years ago the role or the value of these distributors, and you were really thinking about an alternate strategy, or maybe trying to go all online, or whatever the case may be, if you're still in your job, then you are absolutely changing your course of thought on that. I mean, this shock absorber in the industry that is wholesale distribution proved its worth better than anyone could have ever expected last year. And now it's not like the uncertainty just ended. It's just a new type of uncertainty for the next 12 to 18 months. And guess who's weathering all of that again? It's the shock absorber in the industry, the wholesale distributors. And, talk about strategic relationships. The days of opportunistic customers, contractors, that's long gone, right? Like those
Yeah.
guys who shopped and bounced around and moved for a penny here and there, they're the ones who can't get product right now, right? Because I'm not building my business around them when I don't have all the product I need, right? And same thing for the distributor and their supplier relationships. Those distributors who treat those relationships strategically, are open with both data and communication, were the ones who got more access to product than those who treated it very transactionally and would also jump for 2 cents on a product or something like that, right? So all of it came down to understanding what a strategic relationship really is, and then jumping in with 2 feet until you had a really good reason not to be in it, right? So you get in tight. And so now, instead of contractors maybe going and shopping around to 5, 6 different supply houses, we keep advocating, you better have a 1A, 1B, right? And that's, or else you're going to get left in the dust, because no one's going to build a business plan around you when they can't trust you and they can't believe that you're going to be there when the tide turns.
Well said, Talbot. Thank you for that. Okay, so last question for you, Talbot. So where would a potential member for Hardy go to for more information? So they listen to this, they get interested, they're either an OEM or associate or actual distributor. Where would you tell them to go?
Absolutely. So hardynet.org is our website, and it's a brand new website. The team did an amazing job completely revamping, rebuilding the site. But the coolest part is when you're a member, you can go in and register on it, log in, create a profile, and that gives you an opportunity to subscribe to all the content feeds that you care about, right? So say the market intelligence and research is really important to you, talent development is really important to you, government relations that Alex does is really important to you. You can subscribe to just those things. And then your webpage, every time you go in and are logged in, will be curated to what you ask to see. So all of the most relevant information in your content streams will show up first. Secondly, they built it to be arguably one of the best search engines in our industry. It's kind of like if you took YouTube and Google, smashed it together, and limited it exclusively to HVACR wholesale distribution. And that's what they created. So the cool little thing up in the corner, the search bar, you just enter in a term like A2L or inventory. Anything we've ever put out, video, blog, reports, whatever, will come out, and you can have all that there in front of you. So you're preparing for your next board meeting, strategic planning meeting, sales planning meeting. You can go crazy with those search features and get content for that is still relevant, even if it was published 2 years ago. But now you don't have to know where to find it. You just search for it and boom, there it comes. So really, really cool resource. I'm so proud of the team for what they did with that. And good Lord knows I have no idea how in the world they did it, but I know I use it all the time, that's for sure. But yeah, that's where I would point him to first, and then go from there, and we will make it as easy as possible for you to get as involved or engaged as you like.
Thank you for that, gentlemen, both of you. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to see you at the summer social in a week or two, whenever it's coming up, I know. But I do look forward to seeing you guys at the annual meeting, which is in Palm Desert, I believe, right?
That's right. Yeah, registrations will open next month, right after 4th of July. And I would say everyone book your hotel room, especially early, because we're going to have basically every pillow that hotel has under our block. So
awesome. It's good to be back in person, isn't it? It'll be great. Be great. Refreshing.
100%.
Looking to hanging out with you guys. Gentlemen, thank you both for your time, and looking forward to good things coming out of Hardy coming up here. This is great. Thank you.
Rob, congrats on this. This is a cool forum that you're doing for your customers. I appreciate it.
Thank you both. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, guys.
All right.